The live stream coming up shortly. Then keep on going on with our presentations. I hope by sharing my story, you're probably processing your own story and just asking yourself what kind of a motherhood experience you had. And I remember whenever we are talking about healing mother wounds, stream coming up shortly. Sorry. Whenever we are talking about going on with our presentations, there I go. All right. So I was saying, whenever we are sharing this story, there are people usually feel like my dad really sucks. You know, he really sucked. He was a horrible man, but my mom was amazing. And sometimes I usually say, can you pause that assumption? And first of all, ask yourself, would it have been better if your mother stood up, if your mother spoke up, if your mother probably fought back? Because some of us were hurt by our dads because our moms were passive, you know? And probably also they didn't know what to do. Some of them were, were enablers in terms of what happened to us with also our dysfunctional fatherhood relationships. And so I would just want you to hold space for yourself from a place of, you remember the way we were saying, I don't want to feel guilty or feel shame even as we're having this conversation. I just want to invite God into my space to help me explore everything that is not right. Because one of the things I know is God wants perfection in our lives where we are flowing from life in abundance and our belief systems are aligned and also our experiences are fully processed without any biases, because it's possible to also believe a lie in terms of what my reality was, in terms of those are my assumptions. And, it's just the same when you go for diagnosis. If you miss the diagnosis, then you'll miss the treatment plan. So I want you to open your heart as much as you can to the conversation tonight and just allow yourself to probably face it from a place of, I'm not defending anyone or anything. I just want to probably, just face my reality and invite God into it. So I want us to start with here. This is actually the slide that I shared when we were starting Healing My Inner Child retreat 2 weeks ago. And why? Because your inner child is a result of how you are mothered and fathered. And sometimes you may be wondering like, okay, perhaps right now I am 30, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60. What does it matter? It really matters because every wound that you've not healed from your childhood in terms of how you are mothered or fathered, anything you've not paid attention to is still affecting you. And it's still showing up in unlikely places in your life. And inner child reality check is the fact that every childhood experience that you haven't addressed is still buried in your subconscious and is reflected in your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your attitudes, and your actions. And people actually experience you and they're like, there's something that doesn't add up. And of course, when we go deeper into the mother wounds reflection, you'll actually see that, yeah, those are some of the things people can sense about you. Some of us, even in our marriages, we're actually struggling because we've not healed our mother wounds and father wounds. Some of us, even in our work relationships, because your mother will keep on showing up in different forms and different people. And it keeps on reflecting because your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your attitudes, your actions are not healed, and your subconscious is still suffering and struggling. Then it's possible that the inner child experiences in terms of the mother wounds is still leaking out. And of course, your inner child state influences also the quality of your relationships, the level of your productivity, the extent of your creativity and fulfillment in life. So if these are places you're struggling in terms of, I don't have quality relationships, I don't feel deeply connected to people, I don't feel productive, maybe even in your life, you just feel like you keep on drifting through life and you don't have a depth even in terms of your performance, even at work. And of course, the extent of your creativity in terms of, I don't feel like I'm really living out my brilliance. I don't feel excited and exuberant about life. And of course, I don't feel fulfilled. It doesn't matter what I keep on achieving. I just feel like it's vanity or vanity. Sometimes it actually plays out that way. And of course, the other thing is the reality that as we're starting this conversation, it's not all doom. The fact that Jesus is the divine time traveler who is able to alter the effects of your past, your present, and future experiences in terms of what and when I consciously and fully surrender to Him. And so I'm just praying for you that you'll also have that posture of inviting Jesus as your divine time traveler to go back to your past, even remind you things you forgot, things you minimized, things you assumed about your childhood experiences, things you probably keep on smoothering around, and you just allow yourself to fully face it so that you can be healed in those places. So I want you to think about your mother and to just think about your mother pains. Just think that most of the pains that my mother gave me were probably given to her. And then the person who gave it to her, which would probably be her mother or her father, they were also given by other people. And so the mother pains are usually complex because they are intergenerational. And the other thing, they are also matriarchal and patriarchal patterns. Because you remember, my mother may hurt me, but probably she was not hurt by her mother. She was hurt by her father. And her father was hurt by her mother, by his mother. Probably by my grandmother is the one who hurt my dad. My dad hurt my mom. My mom hurt me. I'm probably hurting my son, who will probably hurt his daughter, you know? And so these mother pains are usually intergenerational patterns. And it's a bit complex, especially when you don't have consciousness and full awareness of what's happening to us. And of course, the other thing about our mother pains is sometimes to sit down and ask yourself, what if, despite all the pain, the devastation, the brokenness my mother caused me, that is the best she could offer? What if that was her best? In her lack of consciousness, in probably her dysfunctions, it's like she actually gave me her best flowers. You know, and this is just a picture of a mother holding flowers. You know, what if everything that she did to me was actually her best, and she gave me her best flowers, her best intentions? Like, that is the best she could do. And what if, probably if this is my grandmother, because this is a very old photo, it's actually probably a 30s kind of a photo or even before. What if her mother also, much as she really hurt my mother, those were the best flowers she could give? And she really hurt my dad in terms of my probably patriarchal grandmother. What if those were the best flowers she could give my dad? And so when you think about my mother pains, sometimes they were actually roses. But the problem is that there were more thorns than the petals. And that is what we are still struggling with and suffering from. But what if, just what if, that is actually the best they could do? And that is the best they offered. And so we're going to hold this space with empathy and also being realistic on exactly what happened to us. So what is a mother wound? A mother wound is emotional and psychological scars that result from a dysfunctional or inadequate mother-child relationship. So it doesn't mean that every time it was dysfunctional, sometimes it was inadequate in terms of I was undersupplied. For example, like even the way I was talking about mothers who are silent, and they perpetuated, they enabled, you know, the dysfunctions and the things that we went through. Even some of us who are victimized by others in terms of my dysfunctions in school, she enabled them because of her silence and wanting to just fit in, people-pleasing tendencies, approval addiction, and through her passivity, which is sometimes now the inadequate parenting, it still brought me emotional and psychological scars. You know, so sometimes it was dysfunctional where she was totally the perpetrator. Sometimes it was also inadequate in terms of she didn't do enough in my mother-child relationship in terms of her abilities and probably capacity. And of course, mother wound also refers to the patterns and beliefs that have also been passed down through generations, often within patriarchal cultures. Like I've mentioned, sometimes it was mothers and fathers down the line that kept on hitting and probably hurting within patriarchal cultures that affect a person's sense of self-worth, relationships, and overall well-being. So when we have mother wound conflicts and wounds, and of course, when we have those tensions and pains within ourselves, it actually plays out. In my sense of self-worth is affected, my relationships are affected, and of course, overall well-being in terms of just my quality of life. And it's important to understand also mothers carry their own wounds that may influence their parenting, just like I'd mentioned before. So what are some of the signs of mother wounds? It's actually emotional unavailability, the fact that there's a lack of emotional support, empathy, and nurturing. Some of us were hurt this way. And the sign of mother wound is also for you to project forward in terms of, because of how I was raised, am I also portraying these signs with my children? For those of us who are moms. So emotional unavailability in terms of, we felt like there was no emotional support, there was no empathy. Do you remember probably some of us were blamed for the pain we were going through? Actually, like umegongwa, ulikuwa unaangalia wapi, and that time your finger is actually, your toe is bleeding. You know, there was lack of empathy, and of course lack of nurturing in terms there was no that aspect of cultivating you like a nice garden that is supposed to be fruitful one day. You know, we were just raised the military way. And of course that emotional availability is actually one of the mother wounds that some of us may be struggling with. And we also struggle to be emotionally available to our children. And of course, we also grew up feeling unseen and heard. These were some of the things I experienced in my life in terms of just emotional availability. It may actually be something you need to heal from. And then the other thing is criticism and judgment. When we had overly critical moms, constant criticism, and every time you'll just feel not enough around her, you'll just be running around and trying to please her. You're like a dog that is just wagging its tail looking for approval. And some of us probably we still live in this place of trying to one day just hear our mothers get just one compliment just one positive word from our mothers, because this is such a deep wound for those of us who are constantly criticized. And the other thing also, some of us from the criticism and judgment who have always been striving for perfection to gain approval. And sometimes you can actually see these dynamics playing in your workplace, where your need for perfection, your need to be approved is so high. In a way, it's a bit extreme and a bit abnormal. And it's because we are still trying to heal from the pain of criticism and judgments from what we received from our mother. Some of us, it's also boundary violations, mothers who relied on us for emotional support, and we ended up mothering them instead of being mothered. And some of us are parentified children, where you ended up raising your mother instead of your mother raising you. And so for those of us who relied on our mother for emotional support, and of course, this is a boundary violation because in a healthy relationship, a child is supposed to be raised by the mother, not a child raising their mother. And of course, also where our mothers lack, they don't respect our personal boundaries, we just don't have boundaries with them in terms of emotional boundaries, even physical boundaries, in terms of verbal boundaries, also in terms of choice of words and everything. You just keep on feeling like my mother doesn't respect me. She doesn't respect my boundary. I've actually met moms who even feel my mother doesn't respect my children. So she still also goes all over the place with my children. And of course, I feel helpless. It's like you feel like you stand alongside your children and you feel like another child, because of how your mother treats you and your children. Even sometimes for those of us who are married, you can also feel like she treats my husband also like a child. It's like there's just lack of respect for personal boundaries, and boundary violations is just that aspect. Actually, we have a bold boundaries retreat for children on 5th. That will be the other weekend. And to also teach children, like in terms of just building healthy boundaries and boldly, even as young as they are, to understand their personal space and everything. And of course, some of those children will be healthier because it will change also the dynamics of how they relate to their parents, especially the older ones. And when you think about boundaries violation, it's the fact that if you don't have healthy boundaries, it also replicates in other relationships in your life. When you don't have fences, then you keep on showing up everywhere else without fences. In terms of some of us are actually over mothering other people, in terms of every time you go somewhere, you're usually a mother, a parent in a relationship. Because when you have a functional relationship, all your relationships, you should actually be an adult, not a mother, not a child. You're actually an adult. So you're able to also treat people like adults instead of treating them like your children. And of course, there's that aspect of some of us are mentors, you're really doing an amazing job. The problem is when you actually realize that you overparent children, and of course you overparent other people, and then they become like your children in a way. You're actually biting more than you can chew in terms of how you relate to them. There's actually a reflection of something that is missing. And of course, also when you also realize people don't respect your boundaries, you also don't respect other people's boundaries, it can actually be those triggers and reactions from our mother ones. And then, of course, lack of protection. Some of us felt unsafe and protected, physically, emotionally, you just felt like you're on your own. Because some of us, there's just that aspect of there was no nurturing, you didn't feel that secure attachment of feeling like I'm safe. Someone else is looking out for me. I've actually met people who even took themselves to, for example, Form 1, you're the one who looked for scholarship for yourself. It's like you're just on your own in life. And so mothers who are at some point passive, in terms of even children who have raised their other siblings and their mothers who are alive. And of course, there's just that part of lack of protection. She didn't protect you from roles that are not yours. She allowed you to just become a mother and go and on and on. And of course, she took a backseat and just allowed you to go off on your own. So that lack of protection can also play out. And then, of course, internalized patterns is the last one that I want us to figure out for tonight. Of course, we'll just keep on going a bit deeper when we shall be having the retreat. But internalized pattern is difficulty with self-worth, self-trust, and setting boundaries. Some of us are really struggling in this place. And also we have challenges in forming healthy relationships. And then self-sabotage, you just keep on checking out on yourself. You keep on abandoning yourself. You keep on not showing up for yourself in a helpful way. And just because there's still aspects of you that are really, really, really struggling. I want you to share on the chat and probably just type on the chat which one you can relate with in terms of these things that I've shared here. What are some of the things, or even maybe statements that have resonated with you in terms of how you can remember, your mothering experience of how you are mothered, in terms of, do you feel like you struggle with self-worth, you don't trust yourself? Because if your mother never taught you to trust, probably does someone want to share? Someone had unmuted themselves. All right. But I think I'll just refer, we share on the chat. I won't read our names. I'll just read whatever we write there so that you can just see and sample where we are at. Yeah, so when you look at this, do you feel like probably there's problem with boundaries with your mother? Maybe you lacked protection from your mother. Maybe there was just that aspect of also reverse in terms of the parent-child roles. You just feel like I'm probably mothered everyone instead of being mothered. And probably some of us have the emotional unavailability in terms of you never felt emotionally supported. There was lack of empathy in your upbringing. There was also lack of nurturing. Maybe you also felt unseen or unheard. You were criticized overly. And of course, probably you felt also inadequate. Some of us probably, even people who struggle with perfectionism in terms of you always want everything to be perfect. You want perfection in your life. You know, like I met a mom who was like, for me, I really feeling like my children are indisciplined, you know, wenye wanarukanga kwa viti, there's one who doesn't sleep inside the blankets. For me, I like everything perfect and everything neat, and I feel like they're driving me crazy. And of course, sometimes if you look closer, we didn't have enough time to debrief and get to the bottom of it. It could actually be like those were some of the effects of mothers who are also probably overbearing. And then we just find ourselves overbearing as well. Yeah, let's keep sharing. I can see some comments that are coming in. Just share what you relate with and all these points that we've shared here. You know, just some attributes, and you can be like, yeah, by the way, this one resonates with me. This one I can feel it. This one I can see it. And probably I can remember such incidences. And maybe there's something I've not mentioned here because this list is not exhaustive, but I just feel like maybe these are some of the effects of how I was mothered. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I can see one of us has shared emotional unavailability. And another one has shared about feeling unseen and unheard. And then there's someone who has also written, I can relate with constant criticism. My mom was also very strict. Yeah, that is something else. Let's keep sharing. Yeah, just keep on sharing a lot in terms of just anything that you can relate to from this list. Another one has shared about boundaries violation. We just feel like she keeps on overstepping. Another one, emotional unavailability and also feeling unheard. And then lots of self-sabotage. That is also another aspect. Yeah. What can you relate to in terms of feeling like, yeah, by the way, these are some of the struggles I've had in my own life. And then of course there's another one who has shared on constant criticism. Thank you for sharing. We just want to have a moment of honesty in terms of this is where I am. And this was the last slide on internalized patterns in terms of this becomes like, it's like part of my behavior. And some of us, regardless of going for those self-esteem programs, you know, doing affirmations on self-worth, you don't understand why you still feel unworthy. You know, difficulty with self-worth, where you just keep on feeling like I'm useless. You know, you just keep on being taken advantage of. You just keep on feeling like I don't believe in myself. I don't trust myself. I don't see anything good in myself. Some of us have really achieved amazing things in our lives. But because we've not healed from our mother wounds, you just keep on feeling like you're not enough. You are not enough. You know, it doesn't matter what you do, what you achieve. You know, people out here really praise you. Some of us, even academically, we are mighty, you know, in terms of professional achievements, some even assets you've accumulated. It's possible to drive a very big car, but you just keep on feeling like you are nothing. You know, you are just a nobody. And it's because you're just struggling in these places of internalized pattern. Because remember, internalized pattern, it's a pattern in your psyche in terms of it's something deeper than what people can see on the surface level. Some of us, we don't trust ourselves. You don't trust your decisions. You know, you keep on double checking, triple checking. Even when you make a decision, you really go back on yourself. And when we are doing the personality profiling, there's usually part of our personality that is usually either assertive or turbulent. Some of us struggle with so much turbulence. When you say yes, you feel turbulent. When you say no, you feel turbulent. You know, even when you're picking color, a number of things that are different colors. When you pick yellow, when you go home, you're like, I wish I picked red. I wish I picked blue. You know, you say yes to something and then you're like, I wish I said no. It's like there's so much turbulence in you. And that is part of lack of self-trust, where you don't have that confidence of even moving forward with your decisions. You know, we keep on going back and forth. We keep on changing our mind, even when we know we should be assertive. And some of us, it's even affecting how we show up in intimate relationships. You know, we'll easily get into relationships that are dysfunctional when you're struggling with self-worth, self-trust, and you do never understand that probably this is rooted a bit deeper in terms of my relationship with my mother. Some of us have very poor boundaries, even with our children. You know, I actually went to speak in in our parents webinar, not parents, it's actually a seminar because it was physical with over 500 parents last weekend. And just seeing so many parents who are like, I don't feel like I'm in charge of my house anymore. My children control me, they manipulate me. I just feel like, I've lost control over my children. It's like they run the show. It's like I no longer feel like I'm in charge. What can I do? What can I do? Like there was so much aspect of that. And some of us are not able to relate, probably those struggles we have, even with our own boundaries, with probably our mothers, in terms of because of just feeling like she was overbearing, then I'm over lenient and probably letting my children get away with everything. And of course, it's not helpful because we are destroying our children in the process. And of course, also some of us don't have healthy relationships. You just keep on feeling like all my relationships are dysfunctional. And you realize those are internalized patterns. Like a part of your psyche keeps on attracting, toxic people, toxic relationships. It's like you have a toxic relationship at home. When you show up at work, if you have a business, you keep on hiring toxic people. It's like every place in your life you turn, you actually don't have healthy relationships. Even your friends, they just call you when they're in trouble. You just know like everyone is using me literally. And you just keep on wondering, what is wrong with me? What is happening to me? It's actually possible that some of those are internalized patterns from our relationship with our mothers. And of course, self-sabotage, you don't keep on showing up for yourself. I can see more responses have come in. So there's a constant criticism. Seems like we have quite a number. Lots of self-sabotage. And then there's someone else who has said constant criticism and self-sabotage. And then there's another one who has said feeling unsafe, not keeping relationships. And then there's someone else who has said feeling unprotected, which resulted in struggling with setting boundaries. Yeah, thanks for being honest about that. And then another one, things to be done near perfect and occasionally mothering, especially others, especially those young. Yeah. And one of the things you'll realize, some of us are raising very unstructured children like myself, children who will never have their ducks in a row, children who will never probably be that tidy to the level, tidy to the T. And what happens is that you crush the spirits of your child. The moment your standards are too high, they are unattainable. With time, children give up. And when they give up, they actually resign to fate, where they even start doing now the opposites. I usually say, for example, when you are too overbearing, you will actually attract attention in the wrong way because they are like, okay, when I'm doing things right according to me, she doesn't say anything. But when I do things wrong, that is when she gives me attention. Some children will actually go very wild, even later in life, because they only get your attention when they are acting up. But when they are doing their best, you don't notice, you don't appreciate, you don't recognize. And so they're like, any attention is good. Any attention is attention anyways. So you find children really acting up, really wild and dramatic just because that is how they get your attention. Because when they are trying their best and doing it, it's like you're always critical. But when they act up, you're actually concerned. So they're like, oh, let's get the attention at all costs. So sometimes I've actually seen this pattern with some of us who are perfectionists and overbearing. Children get crushed. And then, of course, they give up and they go to the other extreme. And then the other person has said criticism, always being held on a pedestal from a young age. I felt the need to always have it together. And then one of us has also shared challenges in forming healthy relationships. Yeah, thank you for being honest. We just said we are here to hold space and to just see places that can get better. Because yes, it could actually get better. So what are the sources of mother wounds? Even as we just pause and the way we were saying we approach this conversation with empathy, where could it be coming from? Number one, intergenerational trauma. I'd explained this a bit in terms of unresolved trauma passed down through generations. And it's mothers and fathers involved. Because you remember, some of our mothers were raised by fathers, our fathers were raised by mothers, mothers were raised by fathers. So it's unresolved trauma that is passed down through generations of people who didn't have consciousness, they didn't have self-awareness, they didn't do the inner work the way we are doing tonight. And so what happened? They kept on showing up in less than probably ideal ways. And of course, the other thing is societal pressures can also bring about mother wounds in terms of unrealistic expectations placed on mothers. They have to be super moms. They have to have it together. They have to have their ducks in a row. For example, even that expectation of your house should always be neat. Why are you untidy? Why are children untidy? And then you just pressuring your children because what will people think about us? People need to see us a certain way. We have to show up in a certain way. Like my family had this societal pressure that was very extreme. And of course, lack of support for mothers. Some of our mothers had to do it all by themselves. And by the time they're just feeling like, for example, think about my mother, she didn't have support. 5 children with an absent husband. She was supposed to figure out all of us. On top of that, she has a job and she had a business. Oh, that was too overwhelming for one woman. I think I never had empathy until I sat in a psychology class in 2007. My goodness, I think it's just like scales came off my eyes. I was like, my goodness, this was such an overwhelmed girl. By then I was 23. I was like, my mother was almost my age when she had 4 children. What more did I expect from her? And sometimes we may look back and think, oh, Mwakitambo, they had it, they were superheroes. They weren't. They were probably as vulnerable as we are because the societal expression was so high as well, in terms of the society also expecting them to raise perfect children, children who have it together. And it was not practical for them because they were not even sure what they were doing, just the way sometimes we are not. They didn't even know that they're doing things right or wrong. The only thing they wanted was better than what they had. And of course, sometimes they gave us worse than what they had. And some of them didn't have support, even financially. They had to go work and still come and mother and do everything else. And of course, some of them didn't also have emotional support. Some of them went through post-traumatic stress disorder and also that postpartum depression. They went through so much. And of course, by then, such things were not named. Nobody empathized with them. So they didn't have support. In terms of the societal pressure was you have to have it together. If you are trying and it's not working, try harder. That was it. Also, the other sources of mother wounds was personal circumstances. Some of our mothers were raped, they were abused, they were traumatized. Some of them went through so much grief. They lost their parents, their parents lost income, their life changed, turned around. Some of them had parents, even, for example, fathers who were incarcerated. Have you ever gone down to the generations of Mau Mau? Just think about the mothers who raised children during that time where your husband has been taken. He was a sole breadwinner. Your life has spiraled downwards. Some of them, their husbands never came back because they were killed during the Mau Mau regime. These were probably 4 generations before now. And remember, when you're looking at the generations in terms of millennials, Gen Zs, and all these things, when you go down the line, the parents who raised children during those times, they're actually called the silent generation. It's like they were going through so much trauma after all the war and the effects of it and losing control over their lives. They were just a silent generation. It's like they were speechless from what life had done to them. And of course, that was the beginning of civilization as well. So many shocks. And then they're the parents of baby boomers. Then baby boomers raised Gen X. Gen X raised of course, not really raised because some parents had intergenerational children like us. But then after the Gen X was the Gen Y in terms of the millennials, and then Gen Z, and then Gen Alpha, and then Gen Beta, which is there right now. Can you imagine the generational, dispositions that have happened since that era of 1925, 1935? Of course, before that, there was the lost generation, the 25s, and then 45s, those were the silent generation. So just keep on going back there and you're asking yourself, what circumstances, the unhealed wounds, the mental health conditions that were not validated back then. And of course, the substance abuse was still down the line. Like my mother, she came from a family of alcoholics. In terms of the dad who will come and kick all of them out. They will go and sleep in the coffee plantations. He will come and kick all of them out together with their mother. They'll go and sleep outside. He will sleep in the house all alone. Yeah, look at my mother in terms of also what she went through. So much financial struggles. The dad never believed in educating girls. They grew up with shaven hairs because the dad hated children with hair. He'd just be like, these ones will become prostitutes. And so that is a girl who was raised in such an environment, got married to a man who had also gone through so much rejection in his childhood. He went through so much rejection. Oh, my dad, the mother had nothing on him. And it's because she was also in a difficult marriage. My grandfather had children all over town. My grandmother grew up in so much shame. That is my patriarchal grandmother. She had nowhere to hide her face, with a husband who had children left, right, and center with everyone in town, And of course, my grandmother, it's like she switched off, her spirit was crushed. So she hated children who were named after my grandfather's parents. That was now my dad, who was the firstborn, and his sister. Do you know my dad and the sister, so the firstborn and the secondborn, never attended their parents' wedding. So it's like my grandmother put them away to go and stay with his parents. Now my grandfather's parents are the ones who raised my dad and my auntie who comes after him. So just look at all that, all that, all that. And of course, she was also very sick after getting those two children. There's a time she was almost near death. And that is when now my grandfather ventured out. So I think when she got these other children, she was so done with baby one and baby two. Now look at those personal circumstances. My dad, suffering from rejection, he was such an approval addict. Oh, my dad would paint the whole town red for everyone and abandon his family. He had such a need of being liked, used to be called chairman in our town, and he'll even tell us, unajua mnaniaibisha na mimi ni chairman. Unajua kila mtu ananijua hii town, Like I was just telling my mother today, I'd gone to see her. My father suffered from grandiose mentality in terms of he always used to be so famous in his own head. And of course he was to some extent. We really had a privilege up. But at the same time, there was a bit of exaggerations on everything. And of course, my grandfather was also the same way in terms of he wanted us to make him proud. When you are graduating, my grandfather will make a big deal out of it. When it comes to visitors in visiting day, he actually came for my visit day when I was in Form 1H. He will really make a statement, come driving, like he was this grandiose man in our village and everywhere. And of course, my grandfather, my dad also picked that after him. So just thinking about, they had their own unhealed wounds. They were struggling with mental health conditions that they couldn't describe. And of course, probably some of them suffered from substance issues. So what are the, probably even as we start to wrap up this conversation, and then I'm going to tell you about the retreat, what does the healing journey look like for those of us who are actually aware and conscious of our father wounds, our mother wounds, and of course, even our inner wounds in terms of just places where we still feel we are not okay. Because what happens, the effect of mother wounds and father wounds is what heals what wounds the inner child. We need to acknowledge the pain, and some of us actually need to grieve everything that we never had and we never were, we never got. Everything. Just need to grieve, acknowledge your pain, and just say it is what it is, but it wasn't supposed to be. If there was some level of consciousness, but at the same time to just hold space for yourself. The other thing you need to do is develop self-awareness, which is what we are doing tonight, and which is what we shall be doing 2 weeks from now. We shall have 2 evenings, 2 hours each. So it will be a total of 4 hours of coaching for us to just get to the deep dives and of course do reflections and journaling and have a workbook that you shall also work through to just process your own mother wounds. And of course, developing self-awareness is being able to say it could get better also for my generations to come. I need to be aware of how I'm showing up and how I can show up better. And then reparenting the inner child in terms of everything I didn't receive, I need to give to myself. And of course, we shall be working through that together. And then setting healthy boundaries. We'll also be thinking, what does that look like in terms of starting to work on my relationships to be healthy? With my mom, some of us probably our moms are not alive, but you know that as a result of that, you have so many dysfunctional relationships because of what you've not processed. And so we shall also be setting healthy boundaries with probably the people that we know are unhealthy in our lives, and it's because they keep on triggering mother wounds that we have. And then the other thing we shall be doing is, of course, seeking professional support. I'll be offering all of us who are doing these sessions one free coaching session to just help you process what's happening to you. Of course, if you're booking a personal coaching session, it's $50 with me. In terms of, that is about 1.5 to 2 hours of just deep dive to be able to really check on what's happening to you. But then now this one will be complimentary because it's part of the fees that you'll be paying for the healing my inner child, healing my mother wounds retreat. So once you've taken it, and then I'll send you a workbook, which will be an e-workbook, and then you will fill it up and just process everything. There'll actually be so many prompts to journal through your mother wound journeys in terms of looking at the past, looking at the present, looking at the future, even being able to set intentions on what can be better in terms of your relationship, and of course, how you are mothered as well. And so when you think about the healing my inner child, it will even be just asking yourself, what are some of the things you need to discard from the suitcase of everything, the weight you've been carrying in your life? We shall be having lots of journal prompts of even you, how can you give yourself what you never had? And of course, it's processing the past and of course, also gaining a closure so that you can be able to live confidently in the future. And of course, also looking at potential similarities of how other people experience you, and also thinking about non-supportive system in terms of supportive and unsupportive system, and blame and boundaries. We'll also be exploring that as well. Yeah, there will be so many dimensions that we shall go into this, even understanding type of mother wounds. It will be very important for you to just understand which which wounds are you probably reflecting more in your life? And then how is it affecting you today? We shall also be going through that in terms of a very specific and just I will actually just say some bits of deep dive where it gets a bit personal on your own experiences. And some of these things, you've never given them a thought. The workbook will actually probe you. And of course, our sessions together, because they'll be more reflective. We'll even have time for visualization and just being able to just gain perspective and gain insights on so many other things. And then thinking about our healing journey, just looking forward to what we can do and where we can go. And of course, like I said, we shall also be looking at this from the perspective of God's lenses, because I really, really believe in the power of God healing us, especially when we've heightened our self-consciousness, then the healing flows more easily. And of course, forgiveness will also be part of your healing journey. That just the way God was able to help me to really, really let go of my mom. In times of today, she is my most favorite person. We have such a deep connection with my mother, probably because of also the counseling and just the psychology that I did. In a way, sometimes she says, you understand me in such a deep way. Sometimes I talk to you and I just feel like I even forget you're my daughter. Like you're such a healing space for me. And so forgiveness, being able to flow into that place in a way, I feel like I have a deeper and a better relationship with my mother than probably I would have had if I never went through everything that I went through. And so in retrospect, I'm so grateful to God for that journey. And so Healing Mother Wounds will be a virtual retreat. It will be happening from 9th to 10th April. This will be on a Wednesday and a Thursday night. And that is when we shall be having these sessions. And the investment is $65. So that is about 8,350. That is how much you will pay. And of course, this caters for the virtual retreat, the workbook, and of course, a personal session for you to also be able to process, in terms of what happened to you. So normally, whenever we are doing such virtual events for 2 days, we will actually charge you around 6,000 because we charge 3,000 per session in terms of coaching nights. And then for the 2 nights, it will be 3,000. And then, of course, if you are going to have a coaching session, it will be another 6,500. So you can see it will probably be 12,500, but then we are giving you at 8,350. That is how much in terms of just the conversion of $1 at 130. And of course, if you have 8,000, please feel free to pay up and join this class. I'm hoping all of us are already in the coaching group in terms of we have 3 groups in Reconfidence with Paps community. There's the Bold Moms and Bold Wives, and then we have the Bold Woman series where we shall be having different coaching programs into different issues in our lives. And of course, this is one of it. And the next 3 months, we just want to focus on a deeper healing. And why? Because I've journeyed with many women, and sometimes we're not able to relate how our stuckness in current situations is actually related to where we are already stuck in our past lives and in our probably childhood experiences. And so that is why when we shall be doing, like I'd mentioned, for those of us who are joined in later, we've already done Healing My Inner Child retreats. And of course, once you've paid for these 2 sessions, I will actually give you an access to that because it's a bit of a private coaching. We didn't post it online because we've actually done 2 sessions. So we'll be able to give you access to that so that you can be able to catch up on that. And then what will happen is also, once you've signed up for this, then I will encourage you to still sign up in May for the Healing My Father Wounds, so that you just get a 360. And sometimes you may be feeling like, oh, me had a great relationship with my mom, but not with my dad. Why don't you do this one so that you can also be able to understand when your dad comes into the picture, how your mom might actually have enabled that as well. And so I will encourage you to just do a full circle. You remember that your mother is the womb that you lied in and you came from. And so it's important for you to also make sure that you are reconciling and making peace with that. And then once you've done these 3 virtual retreats, I've said in June, we shall be having the Grounded Woman retreat, which shall be bits of related to this because we shall be healing the whole tree of our lives. It will be a physical retreat. And of course, we shall share more details about that later. But tonight, I just want us to probably just have a moment to look at the Healing My Inner Child retreat and of course Healing My Mother Wound retreat, which is the 2 retreats we've done so far. And this one will be coming up on 9th and 10th. And I just want you to probably end this evening with a bit of a reflection that I'm going to lead us on, to be able to just be a bit more in touch with ourselves. I'm going to share one of the prompts that can help us to process a bit deeper. And before that, I want you to just breathe in and out. I know this is a lot of information, probably also very triggering. As I was sharing my story, maybe there are some things you can relate, or you are thinking about your own stories, which might even be probably more hurtful than mine. You know, it's just that regardless of how mild or how deeply we've been hurt, God is calling us to process every hurt, you know, to validate it and to process it. And I want us to just have a time of releasing those emotions that may be feeling overwhelming right now, even as we allow God and invite Him to our healing space. Yeah, thank you. Gladys has actually shared a link which you can use to join that group. Thank you, Gladys. Yeah, and of course, by joining this group, then you'll be able to get more information. I'm going to share a link for signing up for the retreat. And I'm going to also probably share with you the details on the other. So what happens when we share the sign up link? It's actually a sign up link for all the retreats together. I don't know whether Gladys, you can be able to access the link for the sign up, like in terms of where we can sign up for healing. They're actually called Reconfidence retreats. So you can probably use that, and then you can sign yourself up. Even if probably you're not very sure, but you're interested, please sign up there, and then we will definitely be in touch with you. I'm going to share it in the course of the time. But for now, I want you to first of all share what is your take home, maybe an insight you've had from tonight or something, and then I'm going to lead us on a reflection, and then we just go and sleep so that we can just release it all together. What is your take home from tonight's session? You can share on the chat. If you want to also unmute and share, you can do that. Let me just end the live stream first so that we can just have some privacy again. Those of us who are joining on the live stream,